Hello, so I'm Victoria Bennett from the Mobile Technologies Core, and today I will be presenting on Level Up Your Mobile Research, Tools, Tips, and Resources for Every Researcher. And here is what we're going to go over today. So we'll talk a little bit about am I not sharing? Danielle, do you see my
Yeah,
screen?
you are.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. So who is the Mobile Technologies Core? And then we'll get into what we call an anatomy of the mobile study. So the risk and benefits, technology selection and data, building your team, and the regulatory environment. And then we will talk a little bit about resources. And if you want to save your questions for the end or put them in the chat, that's fine. But I also don't mind if you interrupt me. So whatever your preference is. So the Mobile Technologies Core was founded in January of 2021 when I was hired, and we started offering services in the fall of that year. And we really had kind of two big things: reduce friction in studies that include mobile technologies and improve infrastructure for mobile technology research at U of M. And so our primary service that we offer is consultations, and we do a variety of things in consultations. So the list is here. We can discuss automation, data flow diagrams, data pipeline development, data cleaning guidance, data management and reproducibility plan guidance, data management strategies, device and technology selection, mobile data domain alignment with research objectives. We do a lot of referrals. Another thing we were told when we were founded is don't duplicate anything. So we have a really big network of others at the university that do things related to mobile technologies or support that research. Regulatory and compliance guidance, research methodologies for mobile studies, and then we also have some sample protocols, consent language, and other study documentation that we can share. And because this is so much information, we have created a robust resource library with a lot of different features. And I'm not going to go over it yet because we'll cover it more at the end. So in terms of data infrastructure, what have we been doing? The graphic in the middle are kind of the data flow, what happens to the data in a study with mobile technologies. So of course you have your wearable devices, phone sensors, surveys, responses. There's a mobile app. There's some sort of a study, survey, and data platform, or sometimes we call it a study management platform. And then you need all of that information to go into a database. And then the database allows for advanced visualization, and then your analysis occurs in that stage. And then there is a need for long-term storage and mobile. And we have a hope for a mobile data repository. So kind of where are we? What's been done in this space in the few years that we've been around? For data pipelines, these are automated data pipelines that make it so that the data from the studies come into the Michigan medicine environment. HITS is in stage 2 of a pilot to determine the feasibility and staffing needs that would be required to offer this as a service. In stage 1, a new reproducible, efficient data pipeline was built and 2 studies were onboarded. And contact me if you're interested in joining the pilot. If you have a study that is going to be starting soon and you would like an automated data pipeline, contact me and we can work through the details on that. Michigan Medicine IA credentialed study management vendors. We had a multidisciplinary team that selected 4 vendors that meet U of M researcher needs, and we call those our preferred technology partners now. And all of these vendors have IA approval and they have BAAs on file. So that makes it easier. It lowers that barrier for faculty to use them. Data visualization tools. Power BI can be integrated with Python, and R will be available through HITS by the end of this year, so this month. Tableau is available to researchers with the licensing fee. And our roadmap includes the development of data visualization templates for use by study teams. So if you're at the stage where you would like data visualization, contact us and, perhaps we can partner to develop some of those. There's also a need for a study database. We currently have a Oracle database, and Gabrielle has done the initial configuration. And we just started, I guess this is a little bit old, we just started a small pilot to complete the testing. And it's intended to be used by researchers who don't need an automated data pipeline, but still want to use those advanced data visualization tools. So if you're interested in using that, again, contact me. Continuing on, long-term storage or archival data. Deep Blue does meet NIH requirements. It does require public sharing, and it's not suitable for industry-funded research. And ARC may satisfy NIH requirements, but there may also be a cost. Moving to the other side of the screen, a data dictionary tool. ITS is piloting a data cookbook, which is a tool for this. However, we've heard that they might not continue it. So they were hoping if it was successful that it would be offered to research and not just for the business function of the university. There is a free option called Schema Spy, and that can be used until this decision is finalized. And then the data dictionary is, what is it? It helps studies meet NIH requirements, and it also improves study reproducibility because it documents what is in the data for any study. Common data model for mobile derived data. We have developed a framework to start working on this. And so the approach that we're taking is that we're partnering with studies for specific domains because we need a domain expert, a faculty member that is an expert in, say, sleep, the metrics that come out of mobile devices for sleep or activity or CGM. And as we partner with the faculty, we're exploring all of the different devices that have that same type of data so that we can create a standardized model for what that data could look like. And then there's a whole bunch of reasons why that is important, and it'll kind of become apparent at some of the later stages of the presentation. And then a mobile data repository. So currently, AI and DHI, which was previously Precision Health, is assessing the possibility of developing a mobile data repository. So when your studies are done, there would be a place that holds that data. All right, now we're going to talk about the anatomy of a mobile study. Looking at the names, I think a lot of you know this type of information, but for those of you that may be new to this, there are a lot of mobile devices out there that are commercial wearable devices, and that data needs to be transferred in some way, either Bluetooth or Wi-Fi and cellular, to a combination of the participant's cell phone, a mobile app, and also integrated with the self-report data. And then once all of that data gets on the participant's cell phone, it needs to be transferred to a study management tool. And then from the study management tool, the data is then transferred to the university computing environment. If using a study management tool, the devices do not need to go through AI approval. We've worked with AI to, explore this, and as long as you're using an AI-approved study management tool, you do not need to get approval for specific devices. So what are the risks and the benefits of using mobile devices? The risks are there's a potential loss of privacy to the participants. The challenges with troubleshooting technology and whether or not participants can use the technology. And then it reduces the participant pool because if they don't have access to Wi-Fi or a smartphone or the technology, or are able to use it, it could reduce that participant pool, which could be really critical in rural areas, studies that include participants from rural areas. But there are benefits, and that list is a little bit longer. It allows you to return the results for participants and investigators. It's effective and efficient for recruitment, enrollment, and data collection. There's continuous and granular multidimensional data from various sources. So it can combine EMA data with data from mobile devices, other types of survey data all into one place. It's scalable, so it's easy to add participants and increase the size of your studies once you've gotten the pilot data. You can use innovative study designs, which could include micro-randomized trials or just-in-time adaptive interventions. It improves participant communication because there are tools within these study platforms to communicate with participants, and the studies show that using these kind of digital tools do improve compliance, study compliance among participants, and also they not just compliance, but more people stay in the study. And the participants are just living their lives. The data collection is passive and ecologically valid, and they're just out there living their lives, and you're collecting the data from it. So addressing the risks, these are our recommendations. First, keep participants informed. Include third-party privacy policies in the consent. So if you're using third-party technology, make sure that's in there. Provide educational materials and resources for common issues. And we have a group called Mobile Coordinator Network that sometimes discusses these common issues and shares resources for what good documentation might look like for participant-facing documentation. Use appropriate language in study documents, explicit instructions and frequent communications. So you can email, phone, there are in-app notifications and SMS. And make sure that there's a section within the study, within the study app for instructions and resources. And then a call center is also very helpful. Offer low-tech options. So sometimes technology fails. Having non-authenticated surveys available, web-based platforms. Perhaps there are participants that don't want to use their mobile phone but would prefer to use their computer. And then having paper consents available in case of emergencies when things go wrong. Consider the study population when selecting the technology. So part of this technology selection process is determining what technology would be most accepted for use among the population you're working with. And then test communications with study populations. And we do have some videos that discuss the different like language used in text messaging and how much of an impact that can have in study compliance. So when you're planning your study, this is the order of operations we recommend. First, you start with your study objectives. You want to make sure that the science is sound and you're getting what you want out of the study. The next step would be selecting the device that enables you to collect the measures that you're most interested in, that are most critical to your question. And then you would select the study management tool based on what device you're using and making sure that there's an integration for that. And then the last thing you would do is hire your additional team members. And this is a little bit of a silly slide. This umbrella, it's going to show up in a couple of places, and it's just kind of a reminder that everything really needs to go back to the research question. Sometimes technology can be really exciting and it can be fun to think about what could happen. And a lot of these study management platforms offer all kinds of things. And so sometimes when we meet with faculty and we share some of the things that can do, it really gets them thinking about all the options, but it really needs to go back to your research question. And if, having extra bells and whistles and making the study more complex doesn't necessarily improve it. So device selections for wearables and nearables. Some of the considerations that you should be thinking about are battery life. A shorter battery life can interrupt data streams. And if you're monitoring sleep specifically, you definitely want to have a longer battery life. And then user adaptability, preference, and comfort. There's some devices that are just more user-friendly and some devices that are less user-friendly. And while we encourage education to ensure that participants are set up for success, you definitely don't want to select a device that is going to be too complex. And if, make the decision if participants keep the device, we actually recommend that they do, that it is used either as an incentive within the study or is on the IRB as a required piece of the study. And devices vary in size and materials. Last year at the Metric Symposium, we had a table with a bunch of devices. And one of the comments we got is some of these are really big, the wrist-worn devices. And, if you're working with an adolescent population or possibly a female population that tend to have smaller wrists, these really big devices might not be comfortable. And some devices have specific sizing requirements specific to the user. So Fitbit bands, they don't all come in the same size. You have to order a specific size, and the Oura rings have to be sized correctly in order to work well. And then different populations have other considerations, such as sensory issues. Some people can't tolerate wearing a ring. So is that the population you're working with? And then data quality. Different devices collect different physiological measures and at different time scales. What level of granularity do you need? Do you need a summary, daily summaries, minute to minute, or raw data? And we're going to see some data examples in a little bit. Literature review is encouraged to ensure that the device measures you're collecting have been evaluated. We do have some tools to help you identify validation studies, but you want to make sure that the measures you're collecting are clinically relevant. And an example is that some sensors just don't work well on dark skin. And so if you're working with a population that has dark skin, you're going to want to make sure that you're selecting your device appropriately to eliminate any challenges with that. And there's a lot of black box algorithms built into these commercial devices. And so we don't always know what the sensor data, sometimes it's not raw data, there's algorithms and such. And so just knowing that, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't use it. For instance, with activity data, typically the within person is more important than the person to person on activity data. But again, it's going to depend on your study and what you're asking in your study. So making sure it's consistent with in person for steps is really the most important thing typically. And then also study design. Will participants seeing the data impact their behavior in a study? If you're studying insomnia and the person can see on their phone or on their watch how much sleep they're getting, and it makes them more anxious and it prevents them from sleeping, do you want to be able to turn it off so that they're not being able to see it in real time, what's happening? And then, we get asked periodically about bring your own device. And there are some pros. It lowers the cost. And if it's done intentionally, it can improve accessibility. But there are some equity concerns because not everybody can afford to purchase their own device. Hardware quality and reliability can be different. The compatibility of participant devices with the study management software is an issue. So if you're including a variety of devices, but the study management platform doesn't integrate with all of the devices, that can be a problem. The biggest problem, though, is the complexity of combining data from multiple sources. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the devices come from, they have different times measures. So an example of that is some CGMs measure blood sugar on a 1 minute interval, and some measure it every 5 minutes. So you're going to get different types of data if you're using different devices. And then also there are constantly updates, not only software updates, but model updates. And that can make the data inconsistent between older models and newer models, even if it's the same device. And then there's time and expertise required to manage this type of complexity that can increase the cost of your study. We typically recommend using the same wearable, nearable, the same make and model, and purchasing all of the devices at one time. When the devices, when they put out a new model, sometimes you might get stuck. So if you don't, and they don't, none of the device companies tell you necessarily when these things are going to occur. So we had an issue last year where a bunch of people had bought Fitbit Charge 4s and they couldn't find any more Fitbit Charge 4s, and the Charge 5s weren't out yet, and the Charge 5s had different features than the Charge 4s. So if you buy everything at one time at the beginning of your study, it's going to be cleaner for you. Now, with all that said, there are reasons that you might not choose to do it that way, and you might want to do a bring your own study, and we're happy to help you try to figure out the best way to do that to reduce some of the potential pitfalls you might face. And this is just to show you the breadth of all the different types of wearable and nearable brands used in research. And the blue is organized by what type of a device it is. So there's a lot of options out there. And every single one has different levels of validation against gold standard, and pros and cons and integration with other technology. But there's a lot of options out there. So now I'm not going to go over these in detail. I just want you to see some samples. On these slides, we're going to go over kind of common device measures. This one is activity. And in the table with the blue header, the light blue header, it talks about what the domain is, what types of things are assessed within it, and then what constructed or aggregate measures you can get from it, and then the device types that you can use to get those measures. And then there's two types of data output. So one is from a Withings ScanWatch 2, and one is from a Fitbit Charge, just to kind of see what that data looks like. This is for sleep. One of the things I want to call out is that depending on what device type you're using, you're going to get maybe different measures. So it really depends on that's why we start with your study design and what measures are most important to you. So that we can make sure that the device type that you pick is the best option for those measures. And then this is an example, the data is an example from a Fitbit Charge 5. And then on some of these slides, there's also resources that are linked to the bottom. So when we send out the slides later, you'll be able to link on those resources that are related. This is for cardiovascular. So again, depending on the device type you choose, the constructed or aggregate measures that you can get out of it are going to be different. So even though pulse rate can be collected with a smartwatch, a chest strap, or a blood pressure cuff, the constructed measures you get out of those devices are different. And then these examples, this is from a Fitbit Charge 6 and a Fitbit Charge 2. So that shows you kind of the difference between device, same model, but different versions of that model. So there are a lot of challenges with mobile data, not to scare you, but there's not a standardized data management or cleaning rules for mobile data. There can be challenges with participant wear time compliance. So usually in the study protocol, if you're assessing sleep, you'll of course want the participant to wear it overnight. If you're, some studies want 8 hours of continuous wear during the day, during every 24-hour period, during wake time. So making sure that the participant is doing the thing that you ask them to do and what your study is designed to do. And then data missingness. There is an issue with data that doesn't show up, whether it's because the participant isn't wearing the device or something went wrong and it didn't do a reading. There is a high volume of data. Some of the measures, as I mentioned, well, some of them take a second by second measure. I had given the example of CGM on a 1 minute and 5 minute interval, but some of them actually take second to second data. And just imagine over a 24-hour period, if there's a reading every second, how many data points you're going to get. And then just the complexity of the data. It's different than typical research data. And then there can be variability during the study. So there might be a participant that for the first 10 days of the study is totally compliant with the wear time, and then they drop off for 4 days, and then they're compliant for another 10 days. So you have to kind of figure out how to handle those instances. And mobile data requires more time and specialized expertise to clean and process it to make it into a usable format for analysis. So if on your team you only have a traditional data analyst, if you hand them the data that as it comes out, they're going to say, what we've heard is they're going to say, it's not my job to clean this and get it ready for analysis. And so we need to plan for that. So I mentioned study management platforms a lot. We had a project where we evaluated over 20 vendors. Some of the vendors we considered are on the right hand of the screen, and we created a multidisciplinary team to evaluate these vendors. And we were looking for features that were asked for by the research community at Michigan. From a technical compliance standpoint, we wanted auditing capabilities, HIPAA compliance, security credentialing, third-party data use and accessibility compliance. Cost, obviously, we looked at that. The procurement and regulatory processes within the university. So we got all of the ones that we selected IA approved, and we're working on master service agreements for them. And then data extraction, process, and quality. So some of the study platforms, you can only do manual downloads, and some of them can be automated. And so the frequency that you need that data, if you're doing the manual downloads, especially, that's an issue. Also, you need to check the data as it's coming in. You don't want to wait till you get to the end of your study and then find out that somebody wasn't in compliance with their wear time, or there's some other issue with the data. Also, we wanted to know if the data is processed at all, or if it comes the same as it would come from the device manufacturer. And then we asked for data dictionaries because we want to make sure that anybody using the data understands it. And so the platforms that we ended up with, we're calling them our preferred technology partners: Avicena Medical Systems, XBWell, My Data Helps, and MetricWire. They all four have Michigan Medicine IA credentialing. Again, I mentioned that we're in the process of getting master service agreements, but we do have BAAs and DPAs complete for them. We are developing complementary resources specific to these vendors, and we are knowledgeable about the platforms, and all of using any of these qualifies a study for the HITS data pipeline project. So there are additional study management platforms that have IA approval, and I have those in a box here. You are not required to use our preferred partners. The reason that we did this is because there were so many vendors and we're not able to create resources for that many vendors. And so we wanted to get it down to a manageable group that we could build really robust relationships with and understand them really well so that we could provide good guidance. So what are some of the common features? There's a lot of features in these. You can do a fully remote study. You don't ever have to have study participants come into a facility. You don't have to meet with them in person at all. So they offer eligibility screening. Well, I'm not going to say all of them don't offer every single thing on this list, but collectively, these are pretty typical things. And so you can do e-consenting and recruitment through these. They all do have a participant facing mobile app. You can do surveys. They have built-in survey tools. Some of them have survey libraries so that you can just pick from the surveys they have. Many of them have EMA, and you can do automated, scheduled, or triggered EMA. They all do integrate with sensors and wearables. Many of them will integrate with sensor kit data and active tasks. Some of them have the ability to do just-in-time interventions, but they don't currently do those interventions on data collected from mobile. It's usually the interventions are based on surveys. Some of them collect I'm not going to say that right, weather data. So if you want to understand what the weather was at the time that somebody is completing a survey, you can get that. Many of them offer image, video, or audio capture. Many of them offer EHR integration, but I will have there's a little footnote to this. The integration is the patient portal. So it's not what, if you're a clinician, it's not what you see in the EHR. It's what the patient would see. And so it is a limited data set. And then notifications and reminders, and they have a variety of ways. I don't have email on here, but obviously that's a choice, and in-app push notifications and SMS. They don't typically do two-way SMS though, because that opens up some liability. And then compliance monitoring, televisits, gamification. Two of them I think have built-in cognitive assessments, and some of them offer the ability to custom brand the mobile application. But even though all of these resources or all of these features are available, more isn't always better. And so during our consultation process, we can help you identify the right vendor based on, again, what your study objectives are and what's going to, enable you to conduct your study at the most reasonable price with all the features that you need. I'm not going to go over all of these. I'm going to make a couple of comments, but with the 4 vendors that we chose, there's 3 or 4 slides that show all of the different data integrations or all the different device integrations. Some of them obviously have more integration options than others, but what I will say is that there is a difference. So like under Fitbit, some of them say web API, device SDK, and then some of them under Garmin, well, maybe Garmin's not a great. So Apple Health under Withings, some of them, they all only get the data from Apple Health. So depending on how granular you want the data, the type of data integration that the vendor has is important. And so we wanted to be able to provide that information. And also, we can help you because I'm assuming that none of you are technicians or technical experts. And so we can help you understand what these things mean and what the limitations are based on the type of data pull that it does. So there's activity trackers and smartwatches, alcohol monitors, blood pressure monitors, heart or chest straps for heart rate, CGMs, electronic health records, different health apps, insulin pumps and pens, other body sensors. So the Hexaskin device is like a vest that you wear. Act Loomis allows for ambient light detection. And then it also indicates the raw sensor SDK. So if you need the really granular raw sensor data, that is listed here. And then there's other services that including geolocation, air quality, other types of integrations that are offered. And all of this was this information was gathered during the summer of 2025. Sometimes there's a date and not an actual information that shows that it's on the vendor's roadmap, but they're often looking for new integrations. And, if they get a customer that has an integration, many of them will just start offering it once, it's complete for that one customer. They'll just start adding it to the platform for everyone. So they change. And the list keeps going on. So lots and lots of different types of devices can be integrated. And then cost, of course, that's a key factor. We asked each of these vendors, we gave them 3 different scenarios, and the scenarios are listed up in this box. So all of them have standard features. What changes on the different cost summaries is the number of participants. So this one is 25 participants for 6 months of data collection. And you can see the prices are very different and the pricing structures are different. So XBWell, there's just a flat annual cost. It doesn't matter what kind of sensor data. For other vendors, Avicina and MetricWire, the type of data that you're getting changes the cost. And so, so this one is 100 participants between 6 years and one year of data collection. And then this one is for 5,000 participants for 2 years of data collection. And I will note that one of the things with these platforms is that it's not a per study pricing, it's a time pricing. So typically if you onboard with them and you pay an annual fee, you can have as many studies as you want going in, so the participant cost might go up depending on the vendor, but you're not limited. It's not a per study. It's a contract for you as a PI for all of your studies. And then if you do need custom development, we also ask for the prices of that so that people can plan appropriately. And if you want to learn more, we do, some of these have passed already, but each of these vendors, MDEN is our affinity group for folks that manage the data, and MCN is the affinity group for study coordinators. And the vendors were asked to use their expertise in working with a variety of clients to share how technology like theirs can be used to increase study efficiency and reproducibility. And then, so they're using their platforms to demonstrate that. So even when we do have master service agreements, or if you're using a vendor that is not on our preferred list and there's not a master agreement or BAA is already signed, this is something, a set of recommendations based on our experience going through this process that we wanted to share with folks. Things you might want to think about during that scope of development for the scope of work or contract. So defining the pricing and specifying a limit on annual increases so that you don't get surprises. Identifying what support looks like, and we recommend getting 2 weeks notice for platform and support changes, including downtimes, changes in who you would be contacting, or any other changes that would impact study operations or reproducibility. And then having a defined response time for routine technical support and emergent issues. So are they going to respond within 24 hours or 2 weeks if you have an emergency? And then we also recommend that you ask for technical documentation, including data dictionaries, API specifications, and any user guides to support the research coordinators in setting up. And the vendors that we selected, many of them have really robust documentation, but it is something that you should be thinking about. So overall, backing up and taking a higher level view for technology purchasing, within cost, you'll want to know, is it a one-time or a continuous license? Are there costs for data storage? Sometimes the data storage prices can be really, really high, especially with such complex data. Is the licensing per person or per project? So some vendors that we talked with, they were a one-person license or a one-team license. Some of them, you can allow multiple teams. And is the licensing per study, or is it just you can do as many studies as you want within the parameters of the license? And then university tools, and I have the little umbrella here because this can impact how fast you are able to start your study. Is the technology approved for use? And if it's not, what is the approval time and process? And knowing that in advance so that you can plan for it will eliminate you having to change your study objectives to match the technology. And then technology integration. Do all the needed technologies integrate with each other? So an example, most people do not select the EHR integration through these vendors because it limits the data they can get. And so they're getting data from the data warehouse for EHR data, and then they're also getting data. So what does that look like for your team? Does your current staff have the necessary skills to do this work? And do you have the skills and time to harmonize the data with the various data structures? So building your team, we do have an article, a really great article that was written by one of our partners, D3C, about hiring. And this is just a little bit of information from that. So questions to ask before starting the hiring process: what types of technology will the person be working with? What will their role be with these technologies? Will they need to manage and or clean data? And will their work require knowledge of the subject matter? And there's often a discussion about, we're an academic institution, let's get a student to do it. But there are also challenges with hiring students. So do the academic goals of the student align with the project goals, especially if it's a class project? Does the project have a flexible or a fixed timeline? If the student can only work 10 hours a week, can you accommodate that? Is there a clear documentation plan for continuity? What happens if the semester ends and the student's not done? Is that documented? Can somebody else pick it up? And does the team have capacity for additional guidance and support? Because students are still learning. Regulatory and IRB considerations. We recommend that you meet with IRB early and often. And some of the materials you want to include when you're using mobile data is what type of mobile data is collected and how is it collected. So you may be asked to do a data flow diagram. We can help with that if you're not comfortable doing that. Are there third-party vendors involved? And if so, what data do they collect? And we mentioned earlier that the third-party company's information should be in your consent, but also we recommend that you keep this information in the IRB vague. So use the terminology study management vendor instead of using a specific vendor name. Because if for some reason you decide to change vendors, you don't want to have to do an amendment to your IRB. And then will data be retained if participant withdrawals, and what is that process? And will you be asking the participants to return the device after the study completes or withdraws? And again, we don't recommend that, but we know sometimes that is necessary based on, budgets. And then there's a variety of resources, articles that we have written around that, around IRB. We get often asked about information assurance. I will say we're not experts on information assurance, but we have worked pretty closely with them over the years. And just some general information, if you don't know what IA is, it performs technology and workflow risk assessments for the institution. And institutions need to be somewhat fluid to address new threats, meaning processes or credentialing criteria can change without notice. It is required for any device, software, or app that interacts with the university commuting environment. So, like way back at the beginning, I said that if you use a study management platform, you don't need a device approval. And that's because the study management platform is what actually interacts with the university computing environment. And at Michigan Medicine, IA provides a vendor level, not a project level approval. And what that means is as long as you're using an approved vendor with the same data classification that it was approved for, you do not need to go through the approval process. But using a pre-approved vendor reduces time significantly. And we do have an article that lists a bunch of vendors that are pre-approved, not just the ones we've talked about today. And then accessibility standards. April 2026, there is a kind of deadline for universities and other public institutions to have everything that they do digitally accessible, or not everything they do, but all of their digital assets need to be accessible. And so I'm just providing some different information about accessibility. We did ask about that and what the impact or relationship with research is. And what we found out is that all research that is delivered digitally is expected to be accessible. And so, yeah, so this is something that was kind of, came up late last year. And we were like, oh, okay. So any participant facing materials that you provide digitally need to follow all of the accessibility standards for digital accessibility. And then our resources, and we are getting really short on time. So I am gonna open it up for questions. I'm just looking at the chat real quick. So Matthew, we are not familiar with Terra. That is not one that we evaluated. Do we have any questions, or would you like me to go through the resources? Okay. So our resource center, which this is a link, when you get the slides, you can access it. We have a knowledge base that is articles. I think we have over 100 articles, tutorials, code documentation, and other resources. There is a peer-reviewed literature search tool that helps you identify the validation studies and other studies that use devices. Um, there's a code repository that we're putting code in, and we're open to people sharing their code, whether it's for cleaning or other things. Our affinity groups, so this is one of them. And then we also, I mentioned MCN and MDEN earlier. We have a U of M remote and mobile technology expertise tool, and that helps you find other people that have experience with specific technology at U of M. Poster and document repository. So far, the only thing we have in here is our amazing posters from the last two symposiums. A video library. I think we have about 100 videos on a variety of different topics. Mobile health data sets, if you're looking to do secondary research, and we have a discussion forum. So the peer-reviewed literature searches, this is something that we worked with a librarian at the Taubman Library. What it does is, whether you're using PubMed or Dimensions Analytics, it provides, actually, you can just cut and paste from there, depending on what you're searching for, because we found that it's really difficult to find studies based on the technology they used. And if you're looking for examples of how people used Fitbit, or if Fitbit is an appropriate use for sleep, for instance, and you want to find studies that have those examples, it's not always easy to use. And so we've begun building this out, and I found it really helpful. And I've also linked a couple other additional resources from device manufacturers that have different peer-reviewed literature options that you can look through as well. And then we have an article that it has all of these different kind of common challenges, and we've organized all of the resources that we have within each of those topics, and it's called Resources for Mobile Technologies Research. And this is an example of the resources that are adaptive for adaptive interventions. And this allows us to share a lot of resources that are throughout the university or through other places with you. Many of the resources here are from D3C, which is one of our partners. And, we just want to make sure that you're getting the right information from the people that know the most about it. This is the tech expertise finder. So this is just a screenshot, but there's a link to it. We have 112 people from U of M that have indicated different technologies that they have experience with. So whether you're looking for a collaborator or just somebody to help and guide you, or you want to talk to somebody that's used a specific device to see if it's something that you want to do, that is a resource available. And then this is our GitHub repository. Coming soon, we have some EMA cleaning code. And if you have code that you want to share, please contact us. We are open to publishing code that others have created. And then the MDEN repository also has a list of external repositories, which could be useful for researchers using mobile data in research. So again, we're not trying to take credit for anybody's work. We want to just be an access point for providing access to resources that will help researchers and their teams. And then this is a whole bunch of stuff specifically related to data. So if you are the person that handles data, depending on what you're looking for, there there's a lot of different resources available. And then this is our team. So Kathy, myself, Gabrielle, Danielle, and Nicole. And I'm going to stop sharing. And again, open it up for questions.